currently massive corporates, and Neil will explain to you what it is they're looking for, because actually most of them quite like working with local, reliable people. And what they need to do is they need to understand what makes you that, what makes you local and competent and reliable. So when you do a response to a bid, this is how you have to tell them, because they've got no other way of knowing. So Neil's going to take you through that today in some detail, and he'll be giving you actual takeaways that you can start using immediately. And Neil is a director of Bid Academy, and they actually specialize in helping organizations of all size become ready, improve their bid documents, perhaps create other documents, on the side that they can be used as part of the bid response. And he's a key trainer at Bid Academy too. And he's been writing and managing and winning tenders for other people for a very long time. So I'd say that puts you in great hands today. So Neil, over to you, if that's okay.
Wow. Thank you for that, Charlie. I'm going to open up a presentation, which I'm hoping the technology works. It seems to be okay with Zoom or Teams. Let me say just one thing. I'm speaking to you from my home office. Typically what happens in the middle of these, I'm on my own, typically what happens in the middle of these sessions, my other line goes, or my cat starts meowing, okay? So that's the beauty of working from home. So just bear with if that's the case, okay? Hopefully though, we'll get away with the next hour in peace. We shall see. So just bear with me while I open the presentation. Hope you can all see now, rather than me, my ugly mug, a picture of what I understand is Segro, or an artist's impression of Segro Park Hayes, which is a rather large development project, isn't it? Certainly you can see that by the image on the screen. I believe Volker Fitzpatrick are the primary contractor, so I'm sure there will be a lot of opportunity in the coming months and years, I guess, to be involved from a business perspective in that project. I ran a similar session to this on Monday. That was for London Borough of Hounslow. And I showed a picture of what Heathrow might look like after the redevelopment, assuming it happens there. And I believe I'm correct in saying that Heathrow is actually in the Hillingdon constituency. So again, hopefully there will be a lot of opportunity for you local providers there. Let us move on. This is part one, as Charlie said. Just one small correction. Bid Perfect is my company name. Bid Academy is part of us, and that's a brand that we use when we're delivering training. So I suppose in actual fact, in both instances, it is correct. But Bid Perfect is the name that you'll see on the screen. So we're working with both the Chamber and with Brandwin, which is a network of business consultants, to deliver various types of training to the local businesses. So my background, I like wine, as you can see from the screen. That's where my passion lies. But unfortunately, I was going to say it doesn't pay the bills. It pays the bills to a certain extent if you invest in the right way, which luckily enough, I have been able to do. But my background, and this is a really important point, is in selling. And the bidding process is very much part of the selling process. This is something that we find is lacking in many of our clients that we first engage with. There's a kind of expectation, well, twofold, perhaps, that just completing the documentation might be enough, or having the lowest price. I hear this plea, if you like, or this justification or attempted justification that lowest price always wins. Well, that's not the case. If lowest price always wins, we wouldn't have some of the global brands that are out there in the marketplace today in the various different sectors. So when we approach a bid, it's really important to approach it from a selling perspective, to have our selling head on. And that's really what we're going to talk about for the hour that we've got today and into the hour of next week. So there's a couple of primary objectives that come out of that. And the first one is to understand and appreciate what makes a winning bid. And if you understand and appreciate it, it means you've got an approach. It means you've got a methodology, a way of thinking, if you like, a mindset that you can put in place to improve your chances of success. And that's what it's all about. That's the the side of the fence that we want to be on, because this will take time. There's no real shortcuts in bidding. The more time and effort you put into it, the more likely the reward, the gain that you're going to take out of it. Another point I'll make about the terminology, I typically use the word bid. It's part of my company name. We're a specialist bids and tenders consultancy. I'll talk briefly about some of the other services that we provide within this presentation. But there are other words that mean the same thing. You'll have heard tender, of course, proposal, submission, response. The key thing is it's a document that leaves your organisation and it's designed to win a piece of work. Now that might be a one-off project, it might be a contract for delivery over a period of time, 3-5 years, whatever it happens to be. And these days that document is probably going to be in electronic format rather than paper format. In some cases we still ask for a hard copy, and that's fine, we'll provide that. But in most cases it's either a PDF that's sent to the organisation, maybe via email, or also what we're encountering a lot now is portal-based submissions. So an organisation, be that a local authority or a large corporate, will open a portal, and your job is to submit your bid through that portal and follow the instructions, which we'll come to briefly shortly. Your first task, I should say, for today, though, is to just take a moment of contemplation and consider why do organisations go to tender, be that either in the public sector or the private sector. And of course, if we're talking about a large contractor, that would be in the private sector. If we were talking about the London Borough of Hillingdon, for example, that would be in the public sector. But there are reasons, there's a rationale. Why? Because let's face it, I've said it takes time for you to complete the bid. It takes that time for them to come up with the invitation to tender, and then to evaluate those various tenders when they receive them. So they must be looking for something, mustn't they? They must be looking for a series of factors, series of attributes, if you like, from within a provider. So hopefully me gabbling on there has given you a minute or two to give that question some thought. And the reason I asked you to ask the question is for a number of reasons, but the main one is this: if you're able to put yourself in the mind of the buyer, of the decision maker, of what we call in bidding the evaluator, then of course you can look at things from their perspective. You can, to use a bit of an old cliche, walk a mile in their shoes. You can be empathetic in that respect. And empathy is a powerful contributor to an overall successful bid. There's a science and an art of bidding, and we need to combine the two to create what has the best chance of being successful. And empathy is probably more the art, if you like, than the science, but it's a really important factor to consider. So put yourself in the mind of the evaluator. Why do they go to tender? What are they looking for? There's lots of reasons. I'll give you, and there's the first interruption. I'll just turn my mobile phone off. I'll give you the first list, and then we can look at what's following up. They want to be able to make a comparison. And if they are assessing a document or a series of documents, a series of proposals that are answering the same questions and are centred around the same project and the same set of requirements, then they've got that level playing field, if you like, to allow them to do that. Secondly, and coming out of the first one, it is a de-risking process. If they are asking the right questions and challenging questions, and they are assessing the answers correctly and carefully, then the chances of things going wrong in selecting a wrong provider are reduced. So it's a process of de-risking from their perspective. They will need to ensure various standards of compliance. Now, this varies. If it's a public sector organisation, it is the law that they go out to the marketplace, certainly with opportunities over a certain value. If they are a private sector, a commercial business like Volker Fitzpatrick, then there is no legal requirement. But of course, if they're a publicly quoted organisation, or even if they're not, they will be expected to be seen to be running their business in the right way. And tendering to find the right provider is one example of that. There are other factors where they're looking for compliance as well, around policies, around, for example, health and safety, that kind of thing. Around these days, modern slavery, that's another one that comes into the equation. And the various terms and conditions of the contract. They will want to ensure a sustainably competitive price. Now, as I said to you, sometimes we're given this excuse, if you like, oh, best price always wins, which is simply not the case. Again, we'll look at that in some detail, but not massive detail shortly. But if a contract is being delivered over a period of time, and that might be 3 to 5 years, as I mentioned earlier, then the pricing has to be seen to be sustainable over that period of time. They don't want to pay a low price on day one and then pay a ridiculous price, in 365 days' time or whatever. And they want the provider to also prove that they're going to be in business over that period of time. So therefore, that's another factor why the pricing has to be sustainable. Depending upon what they're buying, they're either looking for a return on the investment or they're looking for value for money. I suppose you could explain that for every pound that they spend with an organisation, what is it that they're going to get in return? What value will they receive back? And that's something that we're going to explore a little bit today, but into more on Friday of next week. Value, though, can come from efficiency, can't it? Value can come about by whatever you're doing, whatever services or products you're providing, making their organisation more efficient in some way, and making their people more efficient. And ideally, those efficiencies are something that can be measured, which creates a more tangible reason to work with you. There are lots of other factors. We'll skim through them reasonably briefly. They're looking for someone that's forward thinking. They're looking for innovation. That innovation, different, better ways of doing things. Again, we go back to the V word, drives higher value. So what is it that you're doing, perhaps over and above your competition? What is it that sets you out from what hopefully will start to become the trailing pack? Something that's new, something that nobody else has thought of, something that you do better than the other lot, what we call the usual suspects. Of course, they'll want to understand your capability, they'll want to understand your experience, they'll want to understand your expertise, your competence, they'll want to understand your SQEP. Now, I'm not going to use many acronyms because, of course, they have the potential to confuse. That's something else we're going to talk about next week. But they'll want to understand how suitably qualified and experienced your personnel are. SQEP, SQEP, suitably qualified and experienced personnel. Perhaps they're looking for some kind of improvement as far as communication or collaboration or partnership or customer service is concerned, particularly if they're already working with somebody else that does what you do, a competitor of yours. We all know that things aren't perfect, and maybe things are not very good at all, and they are looking for improvements and fixes, perhaps to a relationship that's not going along the right lines with somebody else. I said about the art and science of bidding. Another part of the art of bidding is they'll look for an organisation and for people that they feel they can work with. They feel there's some kind of cultural alignment. Maybe you've got certain values and ways of working about your organisation that they see are aligned with their organisation. So don't lose sight of that. Yes, there's the hard and fast, pricing and SQEP argument that I've just mentioned, but there are also some of the softer things as well. Is there a willingness to work together? Is there a kind of chemistry fit between the organisations? They'll be looking for that. They'll want to access data. This is certainly come up. This is something that's become more prevalent since the dawn of the information age and accessibility through the internet. So, management information is power, I believe is the old expression. So the better the access they have to information, the more accurate that information, the more timely that information, then again, the better your proposal will be as one factor. They want to work with an organisation that's not only going to look at things as they stand now, but look at things in terms of what's coming around the corner. What is happening in society? What legal changes? What's happening on the health and safety front? All these, this goes back to having this, to a certain extent, innovative mindset as well, thinking about the future as well as what's going on at the moment. They want someone that's going to have take a degree of responsibility and of accountability. I mentioned earlier on that nothing is perfect, and where things do go wrong, and they will go wrong, they'll want to work with an organisation that is able to fix those things, acknowledge those mistakes, and put a plan in place to fix those things quickly, and then review that plan to make sure that it's going as both parties expect. And linked to that, of course, they'll look for someone with a problem-solving ethic. And lastly, they'll want to ensure the satisfaction of internal customers. Now, what I mean by that is the people that are making the decision, the people that are sitting on what's called the decision-making panel or the evaluation panel, are not always the people that will receive the services or the products that you will be supplying. So, if they make a poor decision, if they make a bad decision, if they select a bad provider, then that's going to reflect really badly on them with their colleagues. So again, that's one of the reasons why they should be asking the right questions. They should be asking some challenging questions, and they should be evaluating those questions thoroughly. So, just first things first then, aside from putting ourselves in the mind of the client or the prospective client through this whole empathy piece that we've just looked at, there are a series of basics that you've got to get right within a bid scenario. And if you don't get those basics right, it's just an opportunity. I'll backtrack a second. When the bids are received, let's assume that there are a pile of a dozen different competitive proposals. They'll start to evaluate them. At that point, they are not looking for a winner. They are, to use an expression, looking for losers, because in most cases, a shortlist will be created. And as a result of that shortlist, you'll be asked to have further conversations if you're on the shortlist. So by looking for losers, they're looking for reasons why you shouldn't be on the shortlist. One of those reasons might be because you got the basics wrong. So the basics are absolutely essential. The basics are not enough to win. The basics might not even be enough to get you on the shortlist, but they're the start. They're where you need to be. There will be a questionnaire of some, there's no such thing as a standard bid document, regardless of it's the public sector or the private sector. But there is no doubt there will be a questionnaire, because you will have to provide certain basic details about your organisation, literally from the address and the contact name through to what you do and the services you provide and so on. So make sure that you complete all of the sections in the questionnaire. And once you've completed it, get somebody else to check it and review it to make sure that that's the case. In a public sector bid, so if you were bidding to the London Borough of Hillingdon rather than Volker Fitzpatrick, there's a document that you need to sign. That document's called a form of tender. And that just confirms to the authority that you have read the bid documentation and you are happy with the terms and conditions and so on. Just so take a look out for that in a public sector bid. Make sure you sign it and return it. The same is true also in public sector with what's called a non-collusion certificate. That's to confirm to the authority you've not colluded with any other potential provider as part of this project. So again, you've got to sign that and send it back. In all cases, you will probably, by that I mean commercial and public sector, you will probably be asked for some form of proof of your standing of your financials. Typically, that will be a set of accounts, or maybe the last 3 years, if you've been in business for that long. Sets of accounts, or maybe some financial projections. So again, look out for what the requirement is. Make sure that you tick that box. You'll probably always be asked for references as well, certainly in the public sector and 99% of the time in the private sector. So don't only typically 3 is the number that you'll be asked to provide. So obviously you'll need to give that information. But what you should also do is notify the referees. Make them aware that you've provided, well, first of all, you need to get their agreement that they're going to be a referee, and then make them aware that which bid it is relevant to, and they should expect a communication from that organisation so they can return the said paperwork. Or if it's a telephone call, then they can receive that telephone call. In some cases, you will be asked to provide certain policies. In other cases, you might just be asked to confirm that those policies are in existence. And then maybe at some point later, you'll be asked to provide the policy, which would typically be health and safety, for example, or business continuity / disaster recovery, There are probably a dozen different types. So again, just look out for what you're being asked within the bid document and provide it at that time, if that's appropriate, or be ready to provide it at some later point in the process if required. And lastly, of course, as well as the words, as well as answering the questions and explaining how you're going to provide the service or provide the products, you'll have to provide your pricing. And again, it's likely that you will be given a template. Not always, but in some cases you will be given a template, perhaps in an Excel format, that you'll need to complete. In other cases, it might be down to you. And of course, you provide that pricing, whatever format you see is appropriate for the given scenario. So the basics, just to repeat myself, where we kind of started, the basics are essential. Those, 7 boxes there, we need to, in some cases, literally tick. But the basics are not enough. We have to focus on the real writing. We have to focus on where the bid is actually won or lost, which is this, to go back again to the point I made when I kicked this presentation off. It's the selling process. So there are a series of principal elements of a winning bid, and I'm going to tell you what they are now, and we're going to make a start today, and then we're going to continue on this terrible cliche I'm going to say here. We're going to continue on this journey. Don't you just love that? At 10 o'clock next Friday morning, the 25th. Same time, same place. So a winning bid revolves around 2 things. It revolves about having the right price. Now, the right price is not the lowest price, because the price is weighted in one way, and then the quality submission, i.e. the answers that you're going to give, are weighted in another way. It might be a 50-50 weighting. It might be a 60-40 weighting in favour of quality, and so 60% quality, 40% price. It rarely is weighted more in favour of price than the other way around, in my experience. Okay, but of course you might find some examples of where that's the case. Regardless of how it's weighted, the price has to be right. So the price has to be sustainable for you and your business. It has to be sustainable into the future. If this is a project being delivered over some time, it has to be competitive when you think of your competition. And if you have been given a budget, and in some cases you will have done by the client, of course it has to come within the realms of that budget as well. So a number of different factors for you to consider as to what is the right price. The first element, though, around this core, if you like, is that your submission, your proposal, directly answers the questions. And it answers the questions according to what we call the evaluation criteria. And we're going to have a look at some examples of this shortly. Okay, we're going to look at an example of a question. We're going to look at an example of how they evaluate, how they score a bid when it gets to the other end, when it gets to the customer end. You need to show that you've not only answered the specific questions, but really you need to show a broad understanding of the kind of bigger picture, the kind of more of the strategy of the organisation and where they are looking to go. The project that I showed you the picture of earlier on, Segro Park, is a massive project. They will be embarking, I no doubt, on dozens, maybe hundreds of tenders that allow that project to be completed. So it's appropriate, if you're involved, to have a bigger understanding of the bigger picture. So, and we're going to look at ways that we can do that again shortly. All of this is going to become clear. These are the headlines, okay? We're going to look at the detail below those headlines. You need to demonstrate a credible and competent solution. I take you back to the acronym I gave you earlier on. SQUEP, your suitably qualified and experienced personnel are part of that, okay? There are other factors that are part of that as well. You need to confirm also what is in it for the client. How, to use another phrase, how do we answer the so what question? How can we make a point and not give them the opportunity to kind of shrug their shoulders and move on? We need to explain in our proposition how their organisation becomes better. How does it improve as a result of working with us? What's the kind of forward momentum? That's something we're going to look at next week. Penultimately actually, and not least, you will need to cement your argument. You will need to make it more believable by providing some form of evidence. And the more evidence you provide, then again, and providing it's relevant, the better your bid will be, the more believable your bid will be. And lastly, we need to write in a certain format. We need to choose a certain style, and that style is not overly complicated. It's not difficult to understand. It's not difficult to process. It's lean, it's direct, it's clear, it's accurate, and it's to the point. Again, more on that next week. Today, we're just going to touch upon these two first elements of what makes the winning bid, answering the question according to the evaluation criteria and showing a broader understanding of what's important to them. The other thing I'm going to mention just at the end of the presentation today, right at the end, is a question that we're asked is, okay, this is good. We understand now what, you know, the key elements of the winning bid and how we're going to put that into practice, but where can we find opportunities? Well, I'm going to give you an answer to that question, not only where you can find opportunities, but where you can assess them, where you can make sure that they are right for your organisation. Okay, there's a session that we're doing, another session next week outside of the chamber, but I'll give you an invitation to come along and spend some time with us on that. Now, I don't know how many people are on this call, how many businesses are on this call. I think 25 or 30 were expected. There might be some organisations that do the same things. I suspect, you know, there are a lot of organisations linked to the construction industry here. There might be a plumber out there, I don't know. There might be a Sparks, there might be a Chippy, amongst all the other Tylers, you name it, I'm sure you're all there. It doesn't matter what you do, okay, whether it's in construction or outside construction. There's some examples on the screen of organisations or sectors in which we work: defence, telecoms, catering, pharmaceuticals. Because if you stick to the golden rules of bidding, you're more likely to create a winning bid. I'm going to give you half a dozen golden rules today and into next week. The subject matter expertise, so what you know about your sector and your business is in your heads. You know, you are the expert. If you don't know your business and your sector, then you've got a problem. But let's assume that you do. My job, using the golden rules and using the modules associated with those golden rules, the training modules, is to give you tips and tricks and techniques that allow you to take that expertise in your heads and get that onto the page in the most compelling way to be successful, to win work. That's kind of, you know, otherwise it's fairly pointless. Okay, so stick to the golden rules. You'll write a better bid. I'm not going to say they'll all win, because that would be ridiculous of me, but you will be with a better chance of winning, either winning ultimately or getting onto the shortlist. And both, of course, are important. So the first half of the first golden rule is this one: excellent bids will usually win contracts. About 400 and something years ago, a gentleman, and he was a gentleman because he's Sir, okay, postulated, there's a good word, isn't it? There's the word of today for you, postulated the laws of physics, okay? Charlie's laughing, he likes that word, good, okay? I can see him in my little window here. The laws of physics. The laws of physics, of course, are significantly used within the construction industry, aren't they? Particularly one of those laws that I'm just about to give you the first part of. The first part of that law is for every action, okay? You know, of course, because you're all, you know, in the business, so to speak, you know the second part of that law. If excellent bids will usually win contracts, that's for the every action part. There is an equal and opposite reaction. So the equal and opposite reaction, which was Newton's, sorry, I didn't even give you his name, did I? Sir Isaac Newton's second part of the law is poor bids will usually lose contracts. Well, some of you might be saying, well, that's obvious, isn't it? You know, omitting the swear word there, that's obvious. Well, it might be obvious. It might be self-evident, okay? But I was going to say we're always surprised. We're probably not at the point we're surprised anymore, to be fair. One of the services that we provide as a consultancy, a bids and tenders consultancy, is a review service. So our client writes the bid to the best of their ability. Then hopefully before it's submitted, they give it to us and we review it and we critique it and we go back with recommendations as to how it can be improved, and we might edit it as well if that's part of the gig, so to speak. And what we find are the same things that go wrong all of the time. Again, regardless of the sector, regardless of the organisation, they typically make the same mistakes. Now, I've identified a few of those in red on the screen here. One of them we're going to talk about in a moment, actually, where we as a writer, as a responder, don't understand a question. Or we've understood the question and I don't know, maybe we just can't be bothered for whatever reason. We haven't answered it in its entirety. And if you don't answer it in its entirety, then the person that's getting at the other end and reading through it and marking it and giving it a score will underscore that question. If you're doing that consistently, you're not going to win. Simple as that. Okay. Another thing that we find is there's a lot about your organisation, your business, what it is that you do, but there's not a lot about the client. There's no kind of link between the two. So it kind of becomes a bit of a kind of experience in brochure writing rather than bid writing. When we talk about us, we've got to talk about us in relation to the client. It has to be specific to the requirements of the project and, to go back to the point I made earlier, to the broader picture of what's going on in their organisation. Kind of aligned to that, if you like, is describing the feature, and this is for the salespeople, which is everybody, as I said, because this is a selling process. The feature is what it is. That the feature is something about your business, your products, your processes, your services, your procedures, your numbers, whatever. Okay, but it's something about you. It is what it is. The benefit is what it does for them. The benefit is how their organisation, again, this is something I mentioned before, how their organisation becomes better through working with you. How are they? Oh, we've got a barking dog. I knew we'd get one at some point in time. If you have your audio on and you've got a barking dog, if you could turn it off, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. So the benefit is the outcome. The benefit is how their organisation moves forward in some way. And that's what we've got to get across. That's what we've got to stress. That's really important. Lacking evidence. So this contravenes one of the principal elements of a winning bid that I've mentioned to you in the introduction before. So we've got to include evidence to make our claims more believable. And there are thousands of other reasons, but those are the main ones that we see on the screen. So when we write a bid, in fact, before we write a bid, we have to ask ourselves a question. And this is the most fundamental question within the process. And if you don't know the answer to that question, then you will never write a winning bid. That's a very blunt statement, is it? But it's true. So this question begins with why, and that's why we call it the why question. And I've given you a few moments to think about it, okay, as to what the answer, what the why question might be. And the why question is this, the why question, and you can replace the word here with your company name, okay, is why us, or why insert company name here. Why will they choose you, in other words? If you don't know the answer to that question, I'm not talking about the massive detail here. I'm talking about, the 3 or 4 or 5 or half a dozen key reasons why they will pick your organisation. If you don't know what they are, then within a bid writing process, you will never be able to explain to the client what they are. When I say the client, by the way, it's an overarching term. It's an organisation that you might be doing business with, or it's an organisation that you want to do business with. Okay, but we'll call them the client for the time being. In sales, we might call them a prospect, but let's use the word client. But if you don't understand it, they're never going to understand it. So that's why it's the most fundamental question that you have to ask yourself when you sit down before you kind of put pen to paper. Hopefully you've read the tender document. Hopefully you've done some other actions as well, which we're going to come to shortly. So there is a learning baseline, and the learning baseline is this. As I've said, there might be some organisations that are representing the same sectors, the same trades that are on the call today. And you know what, you're providing services to business or products to business. So you're all doing, the similar thing in the similar sector, which suggests then that many of the things that you say, many of the claims that you make may be made by your competition. That's how business kind of typically works. Yes, we talk about USPs, which we'll come to next week, by the way, and ISPs, which you might not know about, which we'll come to next week as well. So our job in the bid is not to make it sound like a brochure, not to make it sound like a kind of generic document that's come from our organisation, we've kind of stuffed the price list into. Our job is to use language and terminology and facts that make it focused on the client, and they can see themselves. So it's your document. It's a document that comes from your organisation. It might have your logo on it at some point, depending upon the format. But the client, when they read it, can see themselves in it. They can see what's important to them. They can see their challenges. They can see their aspirations. And more importantly, they can see how you're going to meet those challenges and how you're going to help them achieve those aspirations. That's value-driven narrative. That's value-driven content. And then, as I've said, and I'm make no apologies for repeating myself, we have to support those claims with some form of evidence. Now, there are different types of evidence. There are different strengths of evidence, different classifications. Again, I keep saying this, I know, but we are going to look at that next week, okay? Because I can't get everything across to you in an hour. 2 hours is a stretch, but we're giving you, the best job we can. So another goal was this: understanding what you're being asked and the objectives are critical to writing a winning answer. Let's face it, if you don't understand what you're being asked, I'm going to ask you another question. It's rhetorical because you can't talk to me, okay? Well, you can if you turn your audio on, but you don't have to do that. We already had the barking dog, all right? If you don't understand what you're being asked, what do you end up writing about? Well, I'll tell you what you end up, before you hasten, all take yourselves off mute, I'll tell you what you end up writing about. You end up writing about either one of two things: what you think they want, which might be what they might not be what they do want, or just something about your organisation, which may be of interest, but then it may not. So we have to absolutely understand what it is that they are looking for. There are a number of ways that we do that. There are 4 ways that we identify objectives/needs, and I'll talk to you about a kind of hierarchy in a second as well of objectives and needs. The first way, the obvious way, okay, they will tell you. They'll tell you in what's called an ITT. Now, some of you will be familiar with that language. That stands for invitation to tender. So it's a document that's come from them, from the client, with the various questions and background and so on and so forth in it. Another difference is a more international language is an RFP, a request for proposal. It's the same thing, okay? They're the same document. Some companies call them invitations to tender, which is a bit more British. Another company might call it a request for proposal, which is a bit more international. There will be some questions, which we're going to talk about, or some stipulations or some requirements, okay, which we'll talk about. There may well be, and certainly in the public sector there will be, but there may well be in the private sector, a specification. It's not the most exciting read in the world, if I'm honest with you, and some specifications run for dozens of pages, okay? But you've got to read the specification, because that's telling you how they expect the services or the services to be performed or the products to be supplied. As I said, it's not the most exciting thing to read, but you've got to look at the detail. You've got to get into the nitty-gritty there, because that has to be responded to and referred to within your proposal. So they tell you in the ITT. We can ask questions though, can't we? There's 2 ways of asking questions. The first way, and the recommended way, where we are bidding to any organisation, the best way to bid is to what I call bid warm or bid hot. Okay, that means you've had some form of engagement beforehand. There has been a dialogue in place. Now, of course, over the last, whatever it is, 16 months, that has been, let's say, more challenging. But this doesn't literally have to be the 2 of you in the same room. It might be over the same kind of medium that we're involved with here. But if you have some conversation, some discussion, it means they've got at least some level of understanding of you, and of course you've got a level of understanding from them, because you should be asking questions during that process, and with the answers that you receive, that should be ammunition that you can then use when it comes to the bid. So always try and set up, if you're really interested in dealing with an organisation, always try and set up some form of discussion beforehand, rather than waiting for a tender, an invitation for tender to be published and responding to it, which would be bidding cold rather than bidding hot. Because if you haven't set up the dialogue, pound to a penny, one of your competitors may well have done. But we need also to do some research, and we'll talk about that in a short while. We'll look at the opportunities for you to conduct that research. And doing the research might give you then, or the objective is to glean information that is not included in the tender document. I said to you, a broader understanding is appropriate. And in doing your research, you can get that broader understanding. We can also ask clarification questions. Now, in any bid process, there is an opportunity for all of the bidders or prospective bidders to ask questions. This is normally electronically. Within the public sector, again, there's a difference between the two. Within the public sector, all of the questions from all of the bidders are circulated, and all of the answers are circulated. They won't tell you who asked the question, which organisation asked the question, but all the questions are in public knowledge, or should be public knowledge. In the commercial sector, that's really down to the company that's running the bid process. In most cases, I would say that they will publish the questions and they'll publish the answers, but in some cases, they won't. So there are the 4 ways that you can understand what the organisation wants. They tell you in the ITT, questions, specification, background, ask questions during some form of dialogue process, conduct your research, ask other questions if appropriate during formal questions and answers. There is a kind of hierarchy, but there is an overlap as well. The objectives, well, this is the bigger picture that I mentioned to you before. What's kind of, you look, if you go to a large corporate and they have published an annual report, as they all do. If you go to the chief executive statement, which is always at the front of the document, he will be bit sexist, he, she, or any other for that matter, will be talking about what's important to their organisation, not only now, not only the achievements perhaps that they've made over the recent past, but also what they're looking for into the future. So again, that's really, there is that potential gold there that you can use to your advantage, because as I've said, they'll be embarking on a number of projects that are aligned to those broader strategic objectives. Of course, there are the more defined, there are the more absolute needs of the project. So in reading the tender documentation carefully, and in some cases reading between the lines, I would say as well, it's not only the explicit needs, but it's the implicit needs. We'll come to that in a second, okay? But what is it that they want to achieve? So you've got to make sure you have a detailed understanding, as I've said, of the project and the documentation itself. In some cases, there'll be what we call sub-needs. So there'll be a series of things that you have to achieve before you link to or achieve an absolute need. And then there's the stuff that they might not have thought about. What can you do that's added value? What can you give them that maybe some of your competition can't, for example? Where might you get an edge on your competition there? Because you're the expert. You know about the services that you provide. The company, the client, doesn't always know that. So if you can come up with something that is not maybe part of the main requirement, but you believe, based on what you know about them, based on your research perhaps, there's a bit of value add here, absolutely, let's include that, and that might set us apart from the competition. So once we've got a good understanding of this, let's call it a hierarchy, we've got the foundation, we've got the platform for a winning bid. If we don't understand what they want, as I've said, you just kind of end up writing about what you think they might want, some of which is probably unimportant. When we look at questions, some questions are very straightforward. Some questions are simple questions, and all they require is a yes or a no answer, or a very short answer in a series of words to be provided. There are other questions, though. Sorry for the gulping there for a second. There are other questions, though, that are more complex, perhaps more challenging. And in those circumstances, it is appropriate, it is worth our while understanding how the question is made up. If we understand how the question is made up, the elements of the question, then we again are in a much better position, not only to provide an answer that we know is complete, but to provide an answer that's set out in such a way that it makes it easier for the person at the other end, what we call the evaluator, to read through that answer and literally tick off what it is that they're looking for in that answer, because the answer is structured in the same way as the question. So there's a logic behind it. And if, as I've already I said, if you only answer part of the question, this was linked to the fundamental golden rule, wasn't it? If you only answer part of the question, you only get part of the mark. And as I said, if you do that consistently, then that's going to be a losing bid. So this might be, this is a real example from a real bid. This might be an example of a more perhaps complex, not massively complex. I've seen a lot more complicated questions when we're bidding to help a client decommission a nuclear power station, for example. That was a relatively complex bid. But what you see here is a question that contains 3 paragraphs. So again, I'm giving you some thinking time while I give you a bit of background. 3 paragraphs, okay, well, surely that means there are 3 parts to the question, doesn't it? That's relatively straightforward, surely. Well, maybe not. Maybe there's a bit more to it than that. And maybe, which I'll come to again, there are what I call the implicit factors as well. There are the things that are going on kind of below the line, which in some cases are as important or even more important than what they're saying in black and white, or in this case, in blue and white. So are there 3 elements to the question? Maybe you had the time to take a look through and have a think about that. Well, let's see, shall we? Because I've done the same. This is what we call question analysis, as per the slide. I've done some question analysis on this question, and I believe there are actually half a dozen elements that we need. When we write our answer, we need to make sure that we cover. As I've said, this is for the more kind of complex questions. This is not for the yes or no type answers. But when we put our pen to page to write the answer, this is the structure of the answer, items 1 to 6, and the structure of the answer follows the structure of the question. There's a logical sequence there. As I've said, the evaluator, the person that's looking through this and giving it a score, will be looking for certain elements of your answer relating to their question. So this makes their job as easy. And part of our job as a great bid writer is to make the job of the evaluator as simple as possible. So first element is, okay, high level structure of the company. So high level, that you have to look at the words and just think about the words for a second. High level means that there is no requirement for detail here. So this could be a part of the answer here. It would be an organogram, wouldn't it? It would be a graphic, because that would give clarity to our answer. There'd be some words around that graphic, yeah, but certainly that's kind of where I would start. They want to know the structural division of the company responsible for delivering the services. Well, that's a bit more detail. That could be, part of that could be included in the first part, the organogram, but I want to make sure that I cover that off. Now, if I go back to my thing about bidding warm or hot. If I've done my research and I've had some conversations and I know how they are structured, maybe I could, in my answer, show how the 2 structures would work together as well. Now, they haven't asked for that, but that what we're always trying to do as part of our thinking and our writing is exceed the requirement. So we can meet the requirement, of course, that should be relatively straightforward, but could we exceed the requirement? Could we actually say, okay, if you give us the work, this is how the 2 of us are going to work together? That would be, to me, that would add a lot of value and show that we've done our homework, show that we're really interested, intent on working with them. They want to know the number of people in each team. Now, I go back to my premise that this is a selling process. You can just give them a number. You can say, yeah, there's 2 people in each team, there's 3 people in each team, there's 50 people in each team. But why is it that number? Justify your response, sell your response. If there are 3 people in each team, why is 3 the right number? Why have you selected 3 and not 4 or 2? Particularly, again, thinking about your competition. If you're a smaller company, then you've got to, and you're perhaps talking about smaller numbers of people, you've got to sell the benefits of being small. You've got to sell flexibility, you've got to sell agility, you've got to sell faster decision making, whatever it happens to be. If you're a larger company, you've got to sell depth of resource, for example. But answer the question, sure, absolutely, you've got to do that, but then justify your answer. Why is that the right number? Description of resources expected to deliver the proposed solution. Now, this question is about human beings, it's about human resources, but we're always thinking about, there are 6 C's of bidding. Okay, I'll come back to that next week. One of those C's is to be complete in our response. So when we are delivering a job, a project for a client, it's not only the human beings, is it? There are other resources that come into the framework. There are, depending upon what you do, of course, there are resources and there's tools, there's plants, there are financial resources. So absolutely think of the human beings here, but what other resources play a part in the overall program? I'd make no bones to talk about that. That would be a good thing, providing I've got scope in my, because some cases you're given a word limit. Again, more on that next week. Okay. Then we've got describe other key contracts being delivered in a similar time frame, and link to that how many resource conflicts will be managed. So I'm reading between the lines here, and I think that this client has a concern that you or perhaps your competition may not have the necessary quota of resources. Now that could be simply the number of human beings, that could be the necessary skills and expertise, couldn't it? So put yourself in the mind of the client. Why have they asked this question? Is it a kind of throwaway question, or is there something else that's going on in their mind? And I think, and I might have to rely on my research here, I think there might be something else going on in their mind. Maybe they've been burnt in the past because they've been promised resources and those resources haven't materialised. So again, this is a great example of where some really strong evidence could be included to support the argument that you're making, which might be a case study. So something that we've delivered for another client in the past. Again, more on that later. This is an example of an evaluation criteria. I've mentioned the word evaluator and evaluation a number of times today already. Now, in every public sector bid, you will see one of these. They're not all the same. They all differ quite vastly, but there will be a criteria for evaluation. This is one example. So in some cases, they might score answers from 0 to 5. In other cases, they might score answers from 0 to 10. And there'll be different definitions according to each score. In a private sector bid, they don't always publish this criteria, but I would absolutely ask them, if they didn't give me this in the tender document, I would go back and say, on what basis are you evaluating this tender? Because even a large company, and certainly, if we are looking at Volker Fitzpatrick or any other large construction company or any other large corporate, that again, they have to make decisions in the right way. So there has to be objectivity rather than subjectivity behind those decisions. So look for the published evaluation criteria. If it's not published, ask them the question. And if the tender's been launched, you might have to ask them the question as part of the clarification process, but certainly ask it. Or maybe somebody else will ask it on your behalf. Make a look out for that. Take a look out for that. So just to kind of finish off for today, before we talk about, or I mentioned briefly this tender finding service that I spoke about at the beginning of the presentation. I've said to you that it's appropriate to, of course, read the tender document, to read the questions, understand the questions as per the previous example, to have a dialogue with the client where you can, but also we recommend, we're talking about bidding best practice here. We are talking about how to create the best bid rather than a kind of ho-hum type bid. So we recommend that you do your research. Now, there are two things to consider there. The first is, well, what can we use to do our research? What information is available to us? Where is that information? The second thing is, what is it that we're looking for? What can we use to our advantage in the bid document? Now, I'm going to give you a series of options. What I'm not saying is you have to do all of these things. Okay, you have to do all of these things in every bid. Treat them as a menu. If you're bidding for a small piece of work where you just do a little bit of research, then that's absolutely fine. If you're bidding for a major contract that's going to transform your organisation, what we call a milestone account, then I would suggest, well, you're going to go into research in more detail. Okay, but the choice is yours. In whatever way, do some research. So the first place that we would recommend. So we're talking about opportunities where you're going to find out information now. The first place, of course, is the obvious one, isn't it? It's the website. So go to the website, see what the website is saying. I've used my company, of course, a semi-advertisement here, I suppose. But the website should, most websites are good. Now, most websites will give you pretty comprehensive information. So go to the website, see what you can find on the website. There's some fine looking people, as you can see, or one of them, I'm not saying who that is, on our website. Okay, two of them I should have said there very quickly. Two of them. Got LinkedIn. Now LinkedIn, yes, there's the people. We'll come to that shortly. but then there's the corporate page, isn't there? The company page. So that might be worth looking at. As I said, treat this as a menu. Now, in some cases, companies have groups associated with their LinkedIn profile. We have one. We have the Bid Professionals Forum. If you want to join after this event, feel free to do so. Send us a request to do so. But has your prospective client a group? Again, have a look, see what you can come up with. Twitter, you could follow them on Twitter, couldn't you? Now, you'll get a lot of rubbish, frankly, on Twitter. But if they are using Twitter in the kind of right way, mostly it's done by a marketing person, they'll be telling you what's kind of they're thinking at the moment, what they're thinking about certain things and policies and projects and so on. So again, maybe you get some information there. Facebook. Now, Facebook, of course, is social, definitely social media. But again, most large corporates have a presence on Facebook. You'll get a lot of rubbish. There might be the odd snippet on there you can use to your advantage. YouTube. Have they got anything on YouTube? We have. Okay. And again, most organisations perhaps have posted a video which might give you some information. There's a lot of other things, or a lot of other places, I should say. Of course, you go to the bid document, and that should lead your thinking into other areas of research, which is what we're looking at here. Excuse me for a second. Also, who do you know? What about your network, your internal and external, I suppose, network of people I'm talking about. But also when we think of resources, again, do you have systems? Do you have a database? Do you have any kind of customer relationship management type setup that you keep information on? Can you interrogate that to see if you've done anything in the past, for example? Previous bids, have you bid to this organisation before? If you have, and they gave you some feedback, win or lose, what was that feedback? Can you use that to your advantage the next time around? Annual report, I mentioned that, didn't I, earlier on? Annual report. So the chief executive has said the key thing for us this coming year is X, Y, and Z. So, use that as ammunition. And again, I'll refer back to that shortly. Google search, Glassdoor. If you don't know what Glassdoor is, just Google it, I would say. It's a website that allows employees to give their views on their employer. Now, don't look for the disgruntled employee that is, slagging off the organisation they used to work for. Look for a pattern of opinion there. Maybe again, that's something that you could use to your advantage. Google Alert. If you want to know what is being said in the news about an organisation, just set up a Google Alert. Go to Google and Google Alerts, and you can do that. Okay, and you'll get presented in your inbox each morning what's being said in the news about said organisation. Or you can do your own searching if you want to. Once things are changing, not quite as quickly as we wanted them to. You might have had to cancel your Portuguese holiday. I shouldn't talk about that. But once we can get out and about, okay, do that. I recommend, as I said, bid hot, bid warm rather than bid cold. Get out and start meeting people. Is there a particular governing body or sector federation that, again, you can get information from that might be important? If it's the public sector, they have to publish information because it is part of the secret stuff. It is public. So look for that, minutes of meetings and that kind of thing. Are they equipped to pay your bills? You might want to do a credit reference report on them from the likes of Experian, for example. If they have any other divisions or subsidiaries, maybe you're working perhaps with another part of the group, that might be worth looking at. And how do they stand out from their competition? What makes them different? Again, it's all about having this more rounded understanding of who you are bidding to. The next question was, when we're doing our research, what information are we looking for? I'm conscious of the time, so I'll zip through these reasonably quickly. We're right on the hour now, but I guess we didn't start till about 5 past. So I think I can steal another 5 minutes. What's going on with them? What's new in their world? What ice break? If you are going to have a conversation over and above the bid itself, what can you break ice with? If you're talking to us, one of the things that we've been doing more recently is, apart from this in person, if you like, online training, is we've got a series of e-learning modules available, which you can download on the website for a very small fee. I hasten to add, if you wanted to actually go into more detail than we're able to go into for the last couple of hours. But that will be important to us. That's what's been on our radar, certainly again over the last 15, 16 months or so. Do we know what they do? Now, of course, we know at a top line level, but are there various divisions of the organisation? What those divisions do? Where do they work? Perhaps geographically will be another way to look at that, another factor to consider. What's important to them? What's driving to them? What are their values? What are their opinions? What's their vision? What are their strategies? All good things to know. LinkedIn again. Who do we know now at a human level rather than the organisation? Who are the movers and the shakers? Will be another way to put that. Because personal motivations are another factor. The organisation has certain issues that it will want to contend with, and achievement and requirements that it will want to achieve, but also so do people. And we're bidding ultimately to an organisation, but it's being looked at by people. And just Google them to find out stuff. So just to repeat some of what I just gave you, actually, strategy is what you're looking for, short, medium, long term. As I said, annual report will be a good example for that. Vision and values, that's the cultural alignment. So yeah, we believe in this, they believe in this. There's a coming together of the two organisations, similar to what they think in terms of views and opinions and philosophies, what they deem to be important. So what are the things that maybe are critical, keeping them awake at night right now, which might be challenges on a kind of more negative, if you like. It might be certain goals and aspirations, but things that give you the opportunity to make a difference by providing whatever service it is that they are looking for. What's happening in the marketplace, changes and challenges, the law, socio-economic type stuff, what's going on there, business critical issues I mentioned to you. The language they use. Now, what I don't mean here, are they talking in Welsh or French? How do they portray themselves? What we want to do in our bid is reflect that back to them. So rather than talk and write in the way that works within our organisation, we should talk and write in the way that is prevalent within their organisation. And in doing our research, that would allow us to more easily reflect that. Their definition of a good supplier, at a very broad generic level, they might tell you on a website, for example, what they look for. So when we appoint a supplier, we look for honesty, we look for integrity, we look for forward thinking, whatever it is. Now, in your bid, then you have to explain how you conform to that criteria. We're looking for the key numbers and facts and people and metrics and movers and shakers, as I said before. This is an interesting one. Who said what? Is this? Can we look? And again, in an annual report, the chief exec will make certain statements and make certain claims. And in some cases, and we've used this many times to our advantage. In some cases, we can take that statement because it's reflective of what we want to do for that organisation, or it's reflective of a way in which we also work with a client, because in some cases they're talking about how they work with their clients as well. So look for the statements that have been made from key people within the organisation. And I mentioned to you personal motivations because it's about the organisational objective, but it's also about the people within it. Some people are, not all, but some people are ambitious. And if what we're doing helps them to fulfil and achieve those ambitions, so much the better. That's the end of the actual training. I'm just very briefly, as I said, I would give you a snippet on where you can find opportunities. And did you know, let's talk about the public sector for a second. Did you know that there are over 1,400, that's a massive, crazy figure, I know, but there are 1,400 or over 1,400 frameworks and tendering portals within public sector. Now, the most probably common one in the southeast is an organisation called London Tenders Portal. Some of you might already you don't have to subscribe. There's no payment. Some of you might already be on that. We are running next week on the 23rd of June at 12:30 p.m. and there is a link here on the slide, as you can see. A webinar with an organisation called Stottles. Now, Stottles is a tender. It's a tender finding tool. It's software driven. It's very, very intelligent. It not only allows you to find the tender, but it allows you to assess the quality of the tender as well to make sure it's right for your organisation. And if you join that webinar, this is a paid for service, but if you join that webinar, there is a free opportunity for you. Okay, so hopefully the Chamber can publish that link and you can get onto it. Alternatively, just contact me via these details, okay? So you can take a quick note of my email address or my telephone number, or you can go on the website and you can find contact information there as well. At 11:06, which I think I'm there or thereabouts, I am done, and I'm going to hand you back to Charlie who's topped this meeting, and now he's going to tail it, I believe. So
thank you very much, Neil. Yes, I let things start 5 minutes late, so I apologise for that. Also, Neil, I'm getting feedback. I don't know if your mic is open, so if you could mute.
I'll mute my mic here.
Thank you. So yes, I appreciate we're over time. So there's a couple of important things I want to say first before I bring it, if you like, to a neat and tidy end. But first of all, like, wow, what a lot of stuff that Neil told us. So thank you for that. Great session. Also, as part of attending the series of webinars, everyone who's here today is entitled to a one-to-one. It's with myself or another lady called Elsa, and that is available to everyone here because you are an attendee. So if you'd like to know more information about how do I get a one-to-one, how does it work, please pop your name in the chat with a very simple name, email, and one-to-one, please. We will get back to you. The other thing I'd say is I've really taken 3 things away from what Neil has said. Relationships. We think of answering big tenders as, oh my goodness, you know, it's this huge stack of paper I've got to respond to. Neil said there is somebody at the other end who will read it. And I don't know if any of you have ever hired people, but I certainly have. And I've worked for some quite decent sized companies who have been hiring. And if you can imagine a stack of 100 CVs, they're there. And you have to look at them and think, no, 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 no. Remember what Neil said? First part of winning the tender is not losing. You have to get the basics right. And so imagine yourself as hiring for staff and you say, nah, don't like that CV. That could, if you don't listen to Neil, that could happen to your tender response. And the third thing is, it'd be great to see you next week. Neil will be doing his part 2, and there's also another chap, Jez Ray, because having written the document and submitted it and not lost at that stage, you will probably be invited to do what I would think of as face-to-face presentation. It might be online, but they will want to look at the whites of your eyes and they will want you to explain further about the good stuff that Neil's helped you put in the tender. And you might think, oh my God, Jez Ray will show you how to overcome your fears, how to be confident when you present, so that all the good stuff you put in the tender, you will be able to stand up big and loud and say, yep, we can do that. Yep, we can do that. So that will also be happening next week, Friday the 25th, if I remember correctly. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. If you've got questions that we haven't had time to address, please also put those in the chat and we'll make sure.
Charlie, just a point, Charlie, can you show up the schedule, please, which I sent you earlier today about the next few webinars? That would be really useful to get people to the diaries blocked.
I haven't been looking at my emails when I've been in this.
Okay,
so
I can do that now. That's no problem.
Okay, I probably can too. Yeah, I can. Okay. I can see an unwritten, an unopened email from you. It's just coming up now. So hopefully I'll be able to get that open as we speak. It's opening up. Okay, go into slideshow. Okay, so that should by now share that. Computer that you're looking at never works quickly, does it? Okay. So now, do you want to talk through them, or would you like me to do that? Hello, Nowza.
All yours, Charlie. I sent it to you. It's all yours. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Nowza. So this whole Delivering Growth program is designed to help you as the business owners in Hillingdon. You can see that there are a lot of people who have got together to help you work. So it's between Hillingdon Chamber and Hillingdon Local Council, and also SEGRO, who have effectively funded it, along with Volker Fitzpatrick. And although they haven't had much of a mention today, HS2 are in fact in a similar position. And we as the Chamber and as Brandywine are talking to them, and they have a surprising array of things that they need. And all I will say is Imagine a small village of about 1,000 people, quite a big village of 1,000 people, suddenly pops up where they're doing some work. They have a huge number of services they're looking for. It's not all about, can you burrow a hole? Can you make a tunnel for them through the Chilterns? There are many, many other support services and products they need. So we also have a Fit to Bid program, of which this is part of. And if I go to the next slide, we'll see the schedule. So this is what's happening now. You are on part 1, this line here, 17th of June. We've just completed that, or we will do by the time I stop talking. And the next session is next Friday on the 25th. So please do come back. And then you can see here, we're going into much, much, much more detail. So what we would like you to do is to put these dates into your diary. We can send them around to you all if that would help. Because it's part of the program that you are on. So this is all government funded. It's at no cost to you as a business owner. So please, if you can, put all these dates in. And again, the one-to-one sessions that have been mentioned briefly, it's with either myself or a lovely lady, Elsa, who's been on the meeting today. These are, as it sounds, it's for us to listen to you, to hear your key problems or challenges or ideas, and suggest better ways forward to you. So, sorry about that. I'll just have to get rid of that. So yes, so that's all available as part of the program which you are now on. So I think now's, unless there's anything else you wanted me to mention, I think it's time we should let these lovely people go, because I think we've overrun a little bit.
Many thanks, everybody. Yes, please. Thank you very much, and see you next week. Next Friday.
See you all next Friday.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.